The professor is correct
quickly.
that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, they just released their threat assessment. Anyone can look it up at dni.gov. And their new threat assessment says Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. They have not made the political decision to begin to make a nuclear weapon.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're breaking down an absolutely explosive debate on Piers Morgan Uncensored, where things got heated fast. You've got Scott Horton going head-to-head with Ben Ferguson over whether Iran is actually the threat conservatives keep claiming, and Professor Marandi from Tehran is right there in the middle of it, defending his country while Ben is calling him a hostage video. Then Elica Le Bon jumps in, and it turns into this full-blown argument about who's really telling the truth about Iran's nuclear program, terrorism, and whether America should even be considering military action. Now I'm telling you, you absolutely need to stick around until the very end of this one, because there's a moment where Scott pulls out government documents that completely flip the entire conversation on its head, and you're going to want to see Ben's reaction. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from right now. I love seeing where all of you are tuning in from around the world. All right, let's get into it.
What we have here is an obvious and basic aggressive refusal to distinguish between the Sunnis and the Shiites in the current wars over there. In Iraq War II, 4,000 Americans died fighting against the Sunni-based insurgency that was led by al-Qaeda in Iraq, was the vanguard of that, and they fought on the side of the Shiite alliance, which was also backed by Iran. That was Skiri, Dawa, and the Sodderists. Now, when our friend here says that Iran backed guys that killed the Americans in Iraq War II, that wasn't backing al-Qaeda and the radical Sunnis against America. That was their support for Muqtada al-Sadr, who America was fighting the whole war for, but also for a short time in 2004 and in 2007 turned on him and attacked him. And 500 Americans died fighting Iraqi Shiites, not Iranians. And as I demonstrate in my book Enough Already, I got 10 different sources of American reporters there where American soldiers found these factories where they were making these EFP roadside bombs in Iraq, being made by Iraqis, okay? So no, Iran did not back al-Qaeda. They backed the same side America backed against al-Qaeda in Iraq War II. And then you talk about Syria. You say that Iran backed al-Qaeda.
The question I asked was not about that. The question I asked.
Come on, man.
But you're taking me out of context. I said, no, hold on. But you're taking what I said out of context. So I'm gonna finish. What I said was, are you telling me? No, you're taking me out of context. So I'm going to say it again because you clearly just listen. It'll take 9 seconds. It'll take 9 seconds.
America.
What I said was, are you telling me that Iran has never backed al-Qaeda or ISIS? Period, full stop. For the time that al-Qaeda and ISIS have been alive, has Iran not backed them? I do know. I know that Iran has backed ISIS and al-Qaeda at different points. Now you can go off on your tirade and sell your book. I'm fine with it.
Iran backed Hezbollah. Oh, for God's sake, man. I'm going to finish this. I swear to God. Iran backed the Syrian government and Hezbollah and Russia against al-Qaeda and ISIS in the Syrian war. You just don't even know whose side who is on here, and you're trying to lecture me about it.
I didn't go to an exact time that you're talking about. I said in the lifetime,
not the Shiites.
I said in the lifetime of ISIS and al-Qaeda, has Iran ever backed them? The answer is yes.
No.
I'm not talking about in this exact moment that you're talking about. I said over the lifetime. Over the lifetime of Iran, you're telling me on TV right now that Iran has never backed ISIS or al-Qaeda. You're insane. You're a joke if you want to look at me and tell me that Iran has never backed them.
No,
it's bullshit. Golly, man. Like, sell your book, but I'm sorry. It's stupid.
Let's take your
Just
question.
Look at who does suicide attacks inside Iran. It's ISIS that does suicide attacks inside Iran.
Let's take your statement as it is.
Elica.
You said that the regime in Iran backs Hezbollah and it backed Assad. What was that backing for? Can you clarify? In general, why does the regime in Iran back Hezbollah in Lebanon as an act of imperialism and Assad in Syria act as an act of imperialism? Explain.
Well, I mean, Hezbollah.
Okay, Professor Marandi, maybe you can respond to that.
Nothing to say? No. I want this question.
This ghostwriter didn't write that part of the book, apparently.
I want you to answer the question. And look, go on, tell me. I'll answer the question for you if you can't answer.
I'm perfectly willing to answer the question here. Hezbollah was created in reaction to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in the early 1980s. They didn't even come into existence until after the Beirut bombing of 1983, when the Israelis invaded to attack the PLO, but they mistreated the poor Lebanese Shiites who had nothing to do with the PLO. And force them into resistance. Now, that's not to justify everything that Hezbollah has done, but that's the true origin of their party.
That's not the true origin.
And then it's true that Iran has supported them since then. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. As I've told Piers before on the show, that's the reason that America's intervened in the Middle East is to try to break the Iran-Syria-Hezbollah alliance, and they keep only making it powerful.
Because it is a dangerous terrorist alliance. What does it have to take to get through to you?
This is where Scott Horton absolutely demolishes the entire conservative narrative about Iran, and you can see Ben Ferguson scrambling because he doesn't actually understand the conflict he's talking about. When Scott points out that Iran fought on the same side as America against al-Qaeda in Iraq, Ben's whole argument collapses. Because here's what conservatives never want to admit. The Iraq War wasn't some simple good versus evil story. It was Sunni versus Shiite sectarian violence, and Iran backed the Shiite government that we installed. Scott breaks it down perfectly. 4,000 Americans died fighting the Sunni insurgency led by al-Qaeda in Iraq. That's a fact. And Iran was backing the Shiite alliance, the same people America was fighting for. That's also a fact. So when Ben tries to claim Iran was helping kill American soldiers, he's either lying or he genuinely doesn't know the difference between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. And I think it's the latter, which is terrifying because these are the people pushing for more war. Look at how Ben responds when Scott calmly explains this. He starts yelling about lifetime and context, desperately trying to salvage his point. He keeps saying Iran backed al-Qaeda at different points, but he can't name when or where, because it didn't happen. Iran is Shiite. Al-Qaeda is Sunni extremist. They literally hate each other. It's like saying Catholics armed the Protestant Reformation. It makes zero sense if you know anything about the region. And Scott even brings receipts. He mentions his book has 10 different sources showing American soldiers found factories in Iraq where Iraqis were making roadside bombs. Not Iranians, Iraqis. Because it was a civil war, and we got caught in the middle of it. But admitting that would mean admitting the entire Iraq war was built on lies and ignorance, and conservatives can't do that because it destroys their whole worldview. Then Scott moves to Syria and says Iran backed the Syrian government and Hezbollah against al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's verifiable. That happened. Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and Assad fought ISIS while America was doing this weird thing where we armed Syrian rebels who sometimes worked with al-Qaeda affiliates. That's documented. Operation Timber Sycamore. The Defense Intelligence Agency warned about it in 2012. But Ben just keeps shouting because facts don't matter when you're selling a war.
The way that Hezbollah was created was that after the establishment of the regime in 1979, the IRGC asked for a corridor through Syria to get to Lebanon, and then it started its ideological exportation into Lebanon in order to create an Islamic Republic in Lebanon. This is an act of imperialism, and Nasrallah himself came out and said that the objective of Hezbollah through the regime in Iran was to create a second Islamic Republic in Iran. And Nasrallah himself
sounds like Israel's
said
problem.
Don't interrupt me. Nasrallah himself said that the Hezbollah's budget eats, drinks, and breathes from the regime in Iran. And what does it do in exchange? It's quid pro quo.
They don't exist without them.
Is to act as the front line in the regime's proxy war against Israel. Okay, so it's a mutually beneficial relationship that is rooted in pure imperialism and Islamist expansion. And if you support that, you are an imperialist.
Which explains perfectly why America supports the Bin Ladenites against the Shiites, because that's what Israel wants. Even though the Bin Ladenites are the ones that knocked our towers down, not
Hezbollah. Israel does not want to be attacked by Hezbollah and the regime in Iran. Correct.
Hezbollah didn't knock the towers down. That was the Sunnis that did that.
What has that got to do with Israel?
Okay, I want to end by asking Professor Marandi.
Israel is the victim of Hezbollah aggression.
Listen. All right, time out. I want to ask Professor Marandi to finish this the way we started, which is that Donald Trump has laid down a very clear directive. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Do you believe Iran will develop a nuclear weapon in spite of what the president is saying?
Well, Piers, first of all, I think your audience can see who is calm and who is irrational, who's logical and who's illogical. I think enough has been said. But I just want to point out a couple of things before I respond to that. One is that it seems as if it is Iran that has occupied Palestine. It is Iran that occupied Iraq. Iran occupied Afghanistan. Iran occupies Syria. Iran occupies Libya. Iran occupies parts of
You just support all the terrorists that kill innocent people there. You're a good point. You don't occupy. You just support the terrorists that do the work.
It seems to me that Hezbollah, which was created in 1982, was rightly pointed out, it was a national liberation organization that expelled the Israeli regime from Lebanon, which occupied the capital of Lebanon, and Israel existed. The resistance.
Terrorists.
This is what terrorists sound like, guys.
The resistance in Palestine existed. This is going to come to a shock to these two people. But the resistance in Palestine
go get your pittance from your regime. You did your job today, okay? You're going to live to see another day of propaganda. Good job.
The resistance in Palestine began before the revolution in Iran. But, these two...
But can you answer my question?
We're talking about Hamas. That was
no, he can't answer your question, Piers, because he'll be disappeared if he answers your question.
All right, everyone, time out. I want to let Professor Marandi... Professor Marandi, answer my question. Do you believe Iran will develop a nuclear weapon in spite of what Donald Trump has said?
Iran has said from day one that it is not developing a nuclear weapon.
Now, Elica Le Bon jumps in and immediately starts talking about Iranian imperialism, which is rich coming from someone defending American foreign policy. She says Hezbollah was created when the IRGC asked for a corridor through Syria to export ideology into Lebanon, calling it pure imperialism. And sure, Iran absolutely supports Hezbollah. Nobody's denying that. But let's talk about why Hezbollah exists in the first place. Scott already explained this earlier, but it bears repeating. Hezbollah was created in response to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Israel occupied southern Lebanon for 18 years. 18 years. They weren't there on vacation. They were there as an occupying military force, and Hezbollah formed as a resistance movement. Now, you don't have to like Hezbollah or agree with their tactics to understand that occupation creates resistance. That's just how it works. When you invade and occupy a country, people fight back. But Elica wants to focus on Iranian imperialism while completely ignoring American and Israeli imperialism, which is wild. America has military bases in over 70 countries. We've invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. We've overthrown governments in Iran in 1953, Guatemala, Chile, Nicaragua. The list goes on. But somehow Iran backing a resistance group in a neighboring country is the real imperialism. That's selective outrage at its finest. And then Professor Marandi makes this brilliant, sarcastic point. He lists all the countries America has occupied, Palestine through our support of Israel, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. And Ben and Elica immediately jump on him, but he's right. We are occupying those places, either directly or through proxies. We have troops in Syria right now illegally under international law. We supported the occupation of Iraq for years. But when Iran provides support to groups fighting those occupations, suddenly they're the bad guys? Here's what's happening in this debate. The conservative side wants you to believe Iran is this uniquely evil actor in the Middle East, but they refuse to acknowledge that American intervention created most of these problems. We overthrew Iran's democracy in 1953 and installed the Shah, a brutal dictator. Then we acted surprised when Iranians revolted in 1979. We armed Saddam Hussein with chemical weapons to fight Iran in the 80s. Then we invaded Iraq in 2003 based on lies about weapons of mass destruction. Every single crisis in that region has American fingerprints all over it.
And that is what U.S. intelligence agencies have been saying for years. And just recently, Tulsi Gabbard's organization has repeated the same thing over again, that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. What is happening is that the United States is being pushed by the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime towards confrontation, a confrontation that it will not win. No one will win on this planet. But in any case, the Iranians have a right to a peaceful nuclear program. The Iranians will continue to have a peaceful nuclear program. And if the United States behaves rationally and not like these two guests of yours, if the United States behaves rationally at the negotiating table, there can be an agreement. We already had an agreement, Piers, in 2015. And the Iranians were the ones that abided by the agreement.
And then you supported more terrorism when we gave you billions of dollars from the Obama administration.
Calm down. And no, it was
proliferated terrorism from the dollars we sent you, which is stupid from Obama.
The Iranians abided by the nuclear deal. The Iranians abided by the nuclear deal. Obama violated it. Then Trump tore up the deal. So, and even after, Piers, even after
because it was a worthless deal because you guys were still sponsoring terrorism.
Even after, calm down, even after Trump tore up the deal, the Iranians fully implemented the deal for a year. And then for the second year, the Iranians decreased their commitment stage by stage, which took another year. So 2 years after
Piers,
Trump
if you want to know why Trump's considering
sanctions,
bombing Iran's nuclear site, this is why.
Then began to restart its nuclear program.
He may have no choice.
So who is at fault here? Iran or the United States?
All right, we're going to leave it there. It was a fiery debate.
Wait, let me just say,
Scott, quickly.
The professor is correct that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, they just released their threat assessment. Anyone can look it up at dni.gov. And their new threat assessment says Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. They have not made the political decision to begin to make a nuclear weapon. Your other guest says that they're just such a crazy, irresponsible power. But quite factually, they mastered the fuel cycle.
Panetta just said it accurately.
20 years ago.
They are weeks away from being able to create one.
20 years ago, and they still have not.
I'm not a big fan of Panetta, by the way.
They still, Jesus, they still haven't made an atom bomb, even though they've been able to for 20 years. And that shows, again, they have a latent nuclear deterrent, and they've been so far responsible with it. And we could have another nuclear deal, and we could normalize relations with Iran. It doesn't.
And this is the moment where the entire war hawk narrative gets completely destroyed. Professor Marandi says U.S. intelligence agencies have been saying for years that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon, and Tulsi Gabbard's organization just confirmed it again. Then Scott comes in with the absolute knockout punch. He tells everyone to go look up the Director of National Intelligence Threat Assessment at dni.gov, the official government document, not some think tank, not some pundit's opinion. The actual intelligence community under the current administration. And what does it say? Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. They have not made the political decision to build one. Let that sink in. The entire justification for potential military action just evaporated. Ben Ferguson spent the whole debate screaming about how Iran can't be trusted with nuclear weapons, how they're weeks away from having a bomb, how we need to bomb them before it's too late. And the government's own intelligence assessment says Iran isn't even trying to build one. But here's the part that really exposes the lie. Scott points out that Iran has had the technical capability to build a nuclear weapon for 20 years. 20 years. They've mastered uranium enrichment. They could do it if they wanted to, but they haven't, because they're not suicidal. They know that building a nuke would guarantee American or Israeli military action, so they've maintained what's called a latent nuclear deterrent. The ability to build one quickly if attacked, but choosing not to as long as they're not threatened. That's actually responsible behavior from a strategic standpoint. It's the same position Japan and Brazil have, but we don't threaten to bomb Tokyo or Brasilia, do we? Of course not, because this was never about nuclear weapons. It's about regime change. It's about Israel wanting Iran neutralized as a regional power. and American neoconservatives are happy to provide the military muscle to make it happen, regardless of how many American lives it costs or how much it destabilizes the region. We already had a nuclear deal in 2015. It was working. International inspectors verified Iranian compliance, and the previous administration tore it up at Israel's request. Now we're right back where we started, except Iran has less reason to trust us, and conservative hawks wonder why diplomacy is hard. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.